It's all yours, Bill.
All right, let's go with it. Now, I want you guys to know we're a small group, so I want to be a little bit informal, but I don't want you to miss what I'm trying to say. I work in nonverbal communication. My field of specialization is body language. I do not do anything with facial expression, although I did come up with one thing called bilateral dissymmetry. If you want to know if somebody is schizophrenic, I created a system where you could draw a line down the center of the face, duplicate each half of the face in reverse, and if it looks like two different people, you're likely looking at somebody with a serious problem. But other than that, I work with everything but facial expression, and we tend to bias towards facial expression. That is called facial primacy. What I want to do is I want to start by taking you to a courtroom in 1972. We're going to look at a story written by Alan Dershowitz of Harvard Law School. And I start every talk with this, and when I don't, people complain because it's a fascinating example of how to use body language. We've got an attorney, and he has a client. His name is Edwin Booth. Edwin Booth is accused of killing his wife. So I'm going to move right into his closing argument. And think about what I'm going to say. I'll describe it to the best of my ability, and you'll be amazed at how this works out. So Edwin Booth is accused of killing his wife, and you, jury members, have to decide, did he kill his wife? Right now, the evidence is pretty sad. His fingerprints have been found in blood on a murder weapon. Not a good thing. But as you heard that fateful night, when he came home from into his unlit living room, he picked up an object from the floor, and it was a knife with the blood. He has a history of being abusive to his wife, but he is not on trial for abuse. You know, in their rush to bring this man to trial, the prosecution team has failed in one significant way. They have actually failed to prove that a murder has even been committed. As you know, Mrs. Booth's body has never been found. They want you to skip right past that little detail and put this guy away. Why don't we pretend a murder has been committed? We can do our job. It doesn't work that way. This is a court of law, and we require proof that they have not provided. Oh, they looked for Mrs. Booth's body. You heard the evidence. They dragged the Schuylkill River. They came up empty. They took hundreds of volunteers and went through the woods and fields near their home. They found nothing. Hired to defend Edwin Booth, we too looked for Mrs. Booth, but we began with a very different set of assumptions. Our belief was that she was alive and well and living in another location. And I am here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that on my count of 10, our so-called murder victim will be coming through the doors at the back of the center aisle of this courtroom. And when she does, you cannot convict my client. The courtroom went crazy. Hundreds of spectators are buzzing with excitement. Let me give you the layout of the room before I go any further. I'm the defense attorney. I'm standing at the front of the courtroom. Now, looking at the people observing, I would have to look to my left to see the jury. There are two sets of 6 seats on the wall to my left. They're looking out at the judge as if to say, is he serious? He's going to produce the murder victim? The defense attorney moves right into a 10 count. He looks out at the courtroom where people are buzzing with excitement, and he says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He calls out to the back of the courtroom. By the time he does, there's not a person in that room who's failed to turn around in their seats. In the center aisle, people are leaning over to get a clear line of sight to see Mrs. Booth enter the courtroom. It's a big room, and the spectators at the front of the room don't have a clear line of sight. So they spontaneously stand. And when they do, the jury members no longer have a clear line of sight. So they stand. The doors at the back of the courtroom are slowly pulled open, and there's a pause. Freeze! The defense attorney goes right at the jury. He points to him, he says, don't you move. I want each and every one of you to consider you are standing, you are turned to look at the center doors. In a few moments, the judge is going to inform you of a legal concept we call reasonable doubt. If you have a doubt that a murder was even committed, and look at yourselves, each and every one of you has that doubt, you cannot convict my client. How's that for a closing argument? He busted that jury. I mean, they're standing up, looking, focused, not happening. They go back, they deliberate for less than 2 hours. They come back with a verdict. Edwin Booth is found guilty of murder in the first degree. When they announced guilty, the defendant was stunned. The attorney was flabbergasted. What went wrong? Thanks to their services, the jury members start to file out of the courtroom, and the defense attorney goes right after them. He goes up to the first one, juror number 5, and he points a finger. He says, "How did you find my client guilty?" Number 5 stepped back. He put his hands up. He said, "Hey, you had us dead to rights, but there was a problem with your clothes." Now, I didn't notice it was just one of us, juror number 11. Juror number 11 noticed something strange. You see, in all the excitement of seeing Mrs. Booth come through the double doors at the back of the courtroom, it was juror number 11 who noticed that when those doors were pulled open, there was, in fact, one person who failed to turn around and look, and that individual was your client. Edwin Booth never turned around to look when the doors were opened. The interpretation of that body language is he's the only one in the room who knows, on no uncertain terms, that when those doors were pulled open, no one would be entering. It would cost him 17 years of his life in a Pennsylvania prison where he expired. He died after 17 years. Now, I'm hoping body language doesn't work that way in your professional lives. But what I want to do is I want to share a set of skills so powerful that you'll start to use them before you leave this room. Now, I see several people in the group with their arms folded. So let's go there. Let's have a little exercise. Free up both hands, no phones, no pens, nothing. Push back a little bit from the table and fold your arms. When you've got a prospect and their arms are folded, now we automatically, and stay in that position. I want you there for about 2 minutes. We automatically presume that it's defensive. It is not. This is the number one response to being chilly. It is a comfortable place for people. I've got a little bit of a pot belly. This is fantastic. I rest those bad boys on the top of my gut. Al's doing it. No disrespect intended. But anyway, what we've got is a situation where they're telling you their primary thought process. Let me explain how it works. And don't move your arms. You stay in your home base because I will have a 2-part exercise here. Part 1, fold your arms. If the fingers of your right hand are exposed, and we know that approximately 81% of you are showing the fingers of one hand. If the fingers of one hand are exposed, you are indicating your primary thought process when you're confronted with a problem. Okay? Most people don't realize, but our brains are split in half. We look at right brain, left brain. All right? The left part of the brain controls the right part of the body. So the fingers of my right hand are exposed. That means I'm predominantly a left brain thinker. Okay? What are the tools that I use with the left brain? Think alliteration. Left brain, language, logic. Okay? Mathematics, I'm going to use mathematics in resolving problems, and I'm going to use analysis. Analysis is a mental process that I'm doing right now. It is breaking things into component parts for better understanding. Now, if the fingers of your left hand are exposed, and that's going to be about 20% of males and about 40% of females. If the fingers of the left hand are exposed, you are a right brain thinker. That would suggest that your primary thoughts are creative rather than logical. So we're looking at creative. We're looking at somebody who's very creative in the use of time and space. Okay, so spatial relations. We're looking at an individual who doesn't necessarily go logically, but hops around. Okay, they'll take impulses. They are more emotionally sensitive in general to the logical people. And that's why I think we have a higher number of females in this grouping. So when you're sitting across from somebody and the left hand is exposed, all right, that is likely what you're dealing with. Now, please realize nothing I say is 100% accurate. You can ask my ex-wife. But We're dealing with humanity. We're looking at a baseline of 70% here. Okay. A rare 12% are exposing the fingers of both hands. I can't tell if any of you in the room are doing that, but if you are, congratulations. You are, according to our measures, one of the fastest thinkers in the world. A rare 12% of people show both hands. They will decide when confronted with a problem whether to go left brain, logical, or right brain, creative. They will make this decision. Are you ready? You'll love this. I love chemists. They will make this decision and it will be transmitted to the over 21 trillion cells in the human body in approximately 35 one-thousandths of a second. We call it instantaneous, but it isn't. There's a bit of a delay. So these are incredibly fast thinkers. They can go logical or emotional with equivalent skill. I can't tell, but if anybody in the room is concealing the fingers of both hands, note who these people are, as these are likely dishonest people who are not to be trusted. All right, who was it? I want names. I noticed Steve keeps his hands below the level of the screen, but that's okay. I'm kidding. I'm absolutely kidding. Please, I can't resist taking the low road. Good job, buddy. If the fingers of both hands are concealed, the likelihood is that you have a person who is thinking both logically and emotionally at the same time. All right. Creative thinkers, you bet they are. If they've got a husband and wife team who are looking for financial services and they've got an engineer, she's an engineer and he's an artist, they are bobbing and weaving and having the time of their lives interacting with both of them. So very flexible thinkers. Okay. Welcome to my world. Nothing's 100% accuracy. We're looking at 70% or more. If you're working with clients and prospects, you're going to be working with humanity. Let me give you my formula for what I'm really trying to accomplish here. For years, I was under the impression that people would purchase a service or a product because it was good, it was superior. I don't believe that anymore. I do believe the following. When working with a prospect for the first time, which is my goal in this meeting, looking at a first meeting, when working with someone for the first time, I believe the following, that they ultimately have to buy you as an individual before they will agree to buy anything from you. And when I looked at what it is they're buying, I came away with three things. Okay, let me share with you what they are. Number one, trustworthiness. Okay. Number two, I think they're looking for competence. Well, it's kind of a gimme, but what about trustworthiness? Let's back up a notch. How would you define that? I mean, I've asked audiences all around the world, how do you define trustworthiness? And seldom do I get a satisfactory response. So let me throw it out there for you. I'm going to define trustworthiness as the degree of confidence a prospect has in you that you will respond and act in accordance with their needs and their values. Okay? For me, that's going to be trustworthiness, that you're going to learn who they are, honor their perspective. Trustworthiness, number one. Number two, competence. That's going to be the logical side of the brain. And number three might surprise you. It's likability. They trust you, they find you competent, and they like you. It would be ridiculous not to do business. And I apologize. I see some of you still have your arms folded. Let me go to part two of our exercise. Forgive me, I have ADHD and I will jump around. I tell audiences very often that I come with two warnings. Number one, this is called super learning. There are 7 things you need to know. I'll hold up 3 fingers and I'll give you all 5 points. Your notes will look horrible if you're taking notes. And by the way, if you're taking notes in front of a prospect or client, you will be perceived as 14 IQ points more intelligent than if you're not taking notes. I do recommend 2 things if you're taking notes. 1, always ask permission. Could I take notes? I just think it's a courtesy. Number 2, never do it on a flat surface. This is the only time I'll tell you to pull away from the table, work on your lap at an angle so they cannot see what you're writing. And be sure to write a little bit every time they speak. because I've seen people wait, ignore everything the prospect says. And then when they start talking about financial things, they start writing feverishly. And I want them to feel equal concern for their family life. And, you know, I've got a mother who's in a nursing home, all of that, as well as the financial side of things. Fold your arms. Let's have a little fun. Okay, so you're back to folded arms. Exercise part 2, and I apologize for missing on this. Flip it. Put the other arm on top. Go ahead. You can do it. How comfortable is that? I see some of you are still trying. I've had people separate and not know where they were originally. Release. Don't stay with it. What we just did was we just verified that the great likelihood is you're uncomfortable with that second position. We do something called neurological grooving. We perform precisely the same behaviors day after day after day. Okay. And if you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, Thursday comes along. It's not skip day where you're skipping to work. But what we don't realize is that if we're going to improve our presentation of self, then we're going to feel a little bit of discomfort. You're comfortable here. It's going to be a little awkward here. It took me almost 2 years to get comfortable in both positions. I had to work real hard. On stage, I'd be like, you go from here to here. But realize that's just me and my limitations. So trustworthiness, competence, and likability. If you're in professional sales, you have been told one thing. And if you haven't, you're going to be told it now. Almost everyone says the same thing. Mirror the prospect or client and you'll have instant rapport. You've all been there, right? Mirror the prospect or client. So he says like this, and you're going to say, so how are things? Okay. And we've been told to mirror the prospect or client. I believed it. I sold it for 17 years. And then in Garden City on Long Island, I was walking through a Merrill Lynch office and I saw 2 prospects, a husband and wife, probably in their early 80s. And I realized that mirroring might be the worst thing you could do in a selling situation. Let me tell you why. When a prospect is meeting you for the first time, wouldn't it be reasonable to assume they don't know you? What's their trust level? It hasn't been established. They likely have fear. They might be wary about the meeting. They know you charge fees. That can't be a positive thing. I have seen people sit like this, and the husband and wife in Garden City were turned towards each other. Their knees were touching, and they were holding each other's hands on their knees. They were scared to death of this guy. And he was sitting like that too. He leaned forward and he crunched up. There's a better way to do it. Mirroring is actually called isopraxism. ISM at the end of a word. Most people don't realize this, but ISM is a suffix and it stands for the following: an illegitimate extension of the root word. Okay? So when you see ism, that's a negative. Let me give you an example. Feminism, too much focus on feminine issues. Capitalism, too much focus on money. All right. We look at a political agenda in the world right now where there's a lot of polarization in the United States politics. That polarization is an ism, and there's just too much of it. Okay. And it doesn't seem to work out real well. You don't have to believe me. You can ask Jimmy Kimmel, but we're not going to go there. What I'm looking at is what is a better strategy to meet and enhance a prospect, to send to them a message that says, I care about every aspect of your life and I would like to do the best thing for you. Okay. So I'm not going to recommend mirroring the prospect or client. In fact, if you do enough research, I will share that 63% of the time, when you mirror a person you are meeting for the first time, it actually works against you. That's the research. So what I'm going to suggest, and I'm going to give you 6 behaviors to engage in. You're already using several of these. I might modify a few a little bit, but I'm going to give you an ideal situation for 6 behaviors when you're meeting a person for the full time that will in fact project the greatest trustworthiness, competence, and likability. All right. I want to keep this interesting, so you'll see me jumping around and doing different things. I have some gender things that I did research on. Al suggested that might be an interesting thing. Let's do a gender issue. I've got my little cards here. Look at that. A gender issue. Are men better listeners than women? Okay. When you ask men, they'll say, hell no. Okay. When you ask women, they'll say, hell no. So what happens is rather fascinating. What we're going to find is twofold. Number one, when tested, hear me clearly. Don't try to share this with your spouse. I don't care if you're married to a male or a female, they're not going to believe you. When tested, men actually score 2% lower than women. 2%. That's it. 2 points. Now, we would expect, according to cultural imagery, that it would be like 25 points or something really radical. Here's what happens. We behave differently when listening. All right? Let me give you an illustration of how it works. And women think men are poor listeners. My question is, why would they come to that conclusion? Well, I'm going to act it out for you, okay? What we find is that women head nod as listeners. Women head nod 4 times more often than men. So you've got a guy sitting there, he's engaged, but he's not moving a damn thing. Her conclusion is he died. Or maybe he's just not focused. She's sitting there saying, yep, I'm with you. I'm in, we're good. And he's saying the same thing, but he's not acting in that fashion. Okay? So a failure to head nod as often as women is going to work against us. They will perceive that we're not listening when in fact we probably are. Here's an interesting one. West Virginia University has now documented that 6% of men listen with their mouths open. Is this seen as a good listening behavior? What do you think? Can you imagine sitting across from a prospect like this? Well, I have a big surprise for you, folks. By opening a third sound hole in the skull, sound waves enter the open mouth, and through bone resonance, vibrating on the bones, which is how you hear your own voice. You don't hear sound waves, you hear bone resonance. That's right. You hear yourself. Remember on a tape recorder when you were a kid, you'd say, I don't sound like that. Everybody would go, yes, you do. Opening the mouth and listening with your mouth open, you will hear 3 to 4% more than you do with your mouth closed. Our conclusion, this is a good listening behavior. It is not recommended, however, in this presentation. So I want you to, consider yourself, how do I listen? Ask. I'm sure your wife could tell you. I'm sure your husband would tell you if it's the other way around. But make sure that mouth is closed. That's another reason women see men as poor listeners. Okay? We're not physically active. When men listen, we listen with a different purpose. Okay? Men listen in order to identify a problem that they can then solve. Men are fixers. You come home with a problem, ladies will come home with a problem, say, I had an issue at work, here's what happened. He'll say, tomorrow, when you go into work, I want you to do this. Yeah, they wanted your opinion. I'm sure they did. What we're going to find, however, is that women listen for a different purpose. Men are under the impression that listening is the first step in a process. Women listen, and it's a self-contained unit. If you're taking notes, does anybody have paper in front of them? I want you to write down a word, okay? The goal of women as listeners is to understand. So if somebody would write down the word understand, or if you have to, just envision it. Understand is a compound word. It's 2 short words, under and stand. Okay, good so far. Let's substitute different words for understand. What's a different word for stand? When you get in the batter's box, you assume what? A stance, okay? So stand or stance essentially are the same thing. What's the prefix for under? Do you know? What ship goes under the water? It's It's a sub. Write it down. Women communicate for substance. Okay? Now the women in the room love me. When I'm live, they just go, "Oh my God, that's fantastic. Can't wait to share that with Edgar when I go home." Women communicate for substance. Males are looking at a problem we're trying to solve. Women are looking at the communication and it is intact in and of itself. They don't go to step 2. They just say, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience." And they're done. So there's so much different that we do. And I realize that's not body language, but that is exactly what my experience happens to be. I am married to a tax attorney. My wife went to law school and studied as a tax attorney. Can you imagine what that's like? I have ADHD. My wife has OCD. We've got all the D's covered. When we communicate, I just sit there like this. What am I going to do? And what's fascinating, though, is that because we do have trust and we do understand that we're different and we accept that we actually have a very good relationship. So it's kind of neat to see the way that works. Okay. Let's jump into something. I don't know what we're doing time-wise. I don't have time on my screen. 11:30. Okay, we're good. I want to talk about something that I want to define communication. I define it very differently than a lot of people. For most people, it is going to be defined as the message going from one person to another. And when I've got a live audience and I have a flip chart or a board, I'll draw 2 stick figures and I'll make an arrow going from one to the other. And I write the word message on the arrow. That's the definition of communication. But that, for me, is very incomplete. You see, for me, communication is a process. And I want to see a little bit more about that process. So when I communicate with you, yes, there's a message going across, but you're going to send a message to me. And that message is the shortest English word that contains the letters A, B, C, D, E, F. And that word is feedback. I'm going to send a message to you. You're going to return feedback. It may be verbal, it may be nonverbal. I'm sure you've all been in a meeting where you started to describe something and the reaction of the listener was breaking eye contact, looking away, and you said, "Of course, there's another alternative," and you moved on to the next option because you could see they were rejecting it. Okay? That is feedback. It occurs simultaneous to your message. It also occurs after your message. What most people don't realize, and I think this is fantastic as a growth opportunity if you're in sales, is that we also send a message about a message before we begin to speak. And that message is called feed forward. So the process of communication doesn't begin when I start speaking. Think about somebody going up on stage. The manner in which they walk up to the stage is going to indicate something about them. I've seen people talking while walking up the steps to the stage. I've seen people who maintain quiet till they got front and center, then begin their presentation. We're looking at what we do before meeting a prospect. Okay? Let me give you an example. Working with John Hancock years ago, I said, "How do you impress a financial advisor? What is it you do?" And they said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you've got a meeting with somebody in Austin, Texas. What do you do?" "I go to Austin, Texas. I meet with them." We came up with a different strategy, and it was kind of interesting. This group decided that it would be kind of neat when they set up an appointment to find out what college the financial advisor attended. And then when they went to the meeting, they would typically produce a coffee mug or a cup with the name of the college on it. They say, "Hey, I hear you went to Texas A&M. Wonder if you'd be interested in having this. I got this for you on the way in." And they would hand them a coffee cup. At the very least, they had an audience who was willing to listen to their 15-minute presentation or whatever it was. I mean, it was a pretty neat idea. What is it people do? How do you connect with people? Do you send a mailer before they come into the office, introducing yourself, showing a picture of you with the wife and kids and the dog? You have to include the dog. How do you connect? How do you break the barrier or start to break the barrier in order to create trustworthiness, competence, and likability? Okay. Another one, I'll give you an example of it. Again, going back to New York, we're in New York City. I can't imagine somebody doing this, but they said this has worked incredibly well. When they set up an appointment, they're on the phone saying, okay, we're going to meet next Tuesday at 2:00. And the reason I want to meet at 2, that's our last meeting time. I want you to be able to get back home before the evening rush. And that's a courtesy that we like to extend to our clients. So when we meet at 2:00, what we find is very often the person we're meeting with would like to have a little snack, and they'd like to have something they could munch on. So I'm going to ask you, what could we provide you that you would like to munch on at a 2:00 meeting? And then people say potato chips, or they often say, oh, nothing at all. No. We want to go there. We want to provide you with Skittles. We want to provide you with a bag of potato chips. It's not a big thing, but it's a courtesy we like to extend. And that's what they do. So imagine going in, you're sitting at a table with a person you just met, you're eating your comfort food, hint, hint. You're eating your comfort food. How do you think that meeting's going to go across? It is lights out terrific. They said it's extremely rare that we don't close a meeting when we have somebody and they're eating their favorite snack and drinking their favorite Mountain Dew or whatever the drink happens to be. So I'm wondering, what could you do prior to a meeting that would break down some of the contact barriers, that would distinguish you from everybody else doing whatever they do? And it would be an interesting thought. If you want to think creatively, I would suggest the following barriers. I did this with a group in Frederick, Maryland. They just looked at me and said, well, let's do it this way. What could you do that would cost $0? And they came up with a couple of things. I had one guy in New Jersey. What he does, he's in what I call a campus building. So he's got a building with 4 floors. Of course, it's a Merrill Lynch office on the top floor, and they got the little bull on the button for the elevator. What he does is he works with the security guard in the front of the building. He says, I've got Bill Atcheson and his wife, Bill and Margaret, coming to a meeting at 2:00. They're in their 60s. So when you see them, say, are you Mr. and Mrs. Atcheson? And if they say yes, then say, oh, Bill's waiting for you upstairs, or John, whoever. Walk them to the elevator, put them on, press the button. If you can, give us a quick call so we know who's getting off the elevator. And they've done this. The other thing they did, which I thought was amazing, was they said, even though we have a 2:00 meeting, on occasion, I might be stuck on the phone and I have to finish what I'm doing. I might have a 5 or 10-minute delay. Should that happen, I would like to have on hand for you a newspaper that you actually would like to read. Okay, they started by doing magazines, but it got too expensive. So they would have a newspaper, and it doesn't work unless you do this, with a label with the couple's name, Mr. and Mrs. Smith or whoever. And the receptionist would say, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Bill wanted me to give you this newspaper. I'm going to go back and see if he's free. He should be right out here. But if not, he wanted you to have this in case you had a slight delay. So I'm wondering, is that something you'd be willing to invest in time-wise? But it makes a phenomenal impression on the people that you're meeting for the first time. Let's go through those 6 behaviors I mentioned earlier. I'm going to mention them. I'll give you a little bit of detail about each one. So the first one is eye contact. I guarantee you're already doing this. I want you to know that the average person maintains between 70 and 80% eye contact. I see 2 problems with eye contact when I'm working in a professional setting, okay? Number 1 is that people will use too much eye contact. If you're using 90% eye contact or more, you're often going to be seen as deceitful. It's an indication that you're a competent liar. I never break eye contact. I'm all over this. Yeah. So what you want to do is look down at a document or, do something, just break every so often. It's called gaze retreat. Gaze retreat. That's what we technically do. Women do it a little more effectively than men. I want you to know that when men look at somebody, and if it's a husband and wife, look at both. When men look at a person, we have eyes that are different than you ladies. All right. Males have eyes that come in and literally, like a sight on a weapon, we bore into your face when we look you in the face. So males are going to look you in the eye. We see what's called a business triangle. We see out to here and down to about here. I have done this experimentally with audiences. I'll have people stand opposite each other. Woman at a conference has got a lanyard around her neck, a name tag down here. I'll say, lock eyes, do not break eye contact. Gentlemen, can you read the name on the name tag? Never had a guy who could do it. If we're 18 inches apart, and that's what I try to get them to do, you cannot see below the chin. All right? Now, women 18 inches apart, standing up on stage, I'll say, don't break eye contact. Please describe his belt buckle, and seldom do I have a woman who cannot do it. They see what's called a social triangle. It goes way out and it goes way down. I have actually asked women to describe the tops of a man's shoes on stage with their eyes locked, and almost 7 in 10 will do so accurately. They have the visual capacity of the common housefly, okay? Large bulbous eyes out the sides of their head. What I'm saying is these people see everything, okay?
Shepherd, but hey, no.
What's that?
I was thinking German Shepherd, not housefly, but okay.
No, there you go. But we have different skills. And I think it's really important to know your skill set. So when it comes to visuals, maintain about 70% eye contact. If you have a husband and wife, make sure you do it evenly. Merrill Lynch in Maryland calls me years ago. Women are starting to show up as financial advisors. They would get a prospect, describe an investment opportunity, and the prospect would say, no, thank you, leave. And 2 days later, he'd been buying the same product from a person 2 offices down. And the women were getting hostile. Okay. They asked me to come in, do an investigation, see what was going on. How did these guys steal these prospects from the women? What I found was that, and this is where we started doing research on listening, the women were presuming, because the men were not head nodding, the women were presuming that they weren't interested. They would present an investment opportunity, they would present whatever it is they had to present, and the males were not physiologically responding, so they didn't even attempt to close. They said, thank you for your time. The guy would leave, say, that's a great opportunity. I've got to contact somebody. Obviously, she doesn't want my business. He would call a different person in the office, go in and close the sale. And so what we had to learn was that no matter what they do, you always ask for the close. And we'll get into that in a moment when I talk about closing behaviors. So number one, eye contact. Don't worry if you don't get a high level of eye contact. We did see a bias, and the bias was this. I want you to know what it was. We would find a financial professional looking at the male, looking at the female, scanning accurately. But over 90% of the time, when they asked for a commitment regarding a sale or a strategy, investment strategy, they would look at the male while asking that question. So I think it's really important to include both parties. You get to a point where you say, I've got to close. Look at each individual while you're doing it. Okay. So number one, eye contact. Number two, smile. Okay. What we find is that most people smile just showing the upper teeth. It's called it's called actually an upper smile. We have 3 types of smiles that we research in facial expression. One is called a simple smile. No teeth. We use a simple smile for 2 reasons typically. 1, when we're happy with ourselves. 2, when we're unhappy about somebody else. Is that crazy? Let me illustrate what I mean so it makes sense to you. Bill just closes the sale. He's doing a great job. I'm not going to sit back in my chair and do this. It's not going to happen. All right. I'm just going to sit there and go, I nailed it. Okay. Smile without teeth, self-satisfaction. How about this one? We go to I'm invited to the Christmas party, and everybody's there hours before I arrive. So it starts at 1 o'clock. It's ending at 5. I get there at 4:15. And Al's been drinking. Sorry, Al, I have to go after you. It's either you or Steve. I have nobody else's name. So Al's been drinking. It could happen this way. When I get to the ballroom or the conference room where everybody's partying, I walk in and somebody who's been liquored up yells, "Billy, come on," and starts yelling inappropriately. If I smile showing teeth, I'm agreeing with that person. If I smile without showing my teeth, it's called a social sanction smile. I'm showing that I know the social rules, which are that I have to acknowledge the person, but I'm also disapproving at the same time. So I would look over and do this. Okay? No teeth. How crazy is my world? This is where I live. So showing your teeth, if you've got an investment opportunity that has a great return, that has wonderful insurance, whatever it is, I don't know the options. I'm not a licensed registered rep, and I really mess with people's perceptions. I'll go into a group from Raymond James or something, and I'll say, I'm not a licensed registered rep. You realize what that means. And they all say the wrong thing. They say, yeah, you cannot talk about investing. And I said, actually, I'm the only one in the room who can say anything I please. You're the ones who have to deal with a compliance group. But the perceptions are different. You get into a certain mindset, and this is what happens. Okay? Smile when it's positive. When you have information that is negative, okay? I appreciate the information about this particular investment option. Has it ever had a down year? You have to agree, it has. It's had 2 in the past 13. So do you smile? Only 2? No, that's not going to cut it. What you should be finding yourself doing is head nodding. Yes, there have been some down markets, but they've been very, very slight. Let me show you over time what you can expect from this investment. And past performance is not indicative of future returns, but we all act as though it is. When there's a negative aspect to something, head nodding somberly, that is without a smile, head nodding is a good way to make that connection. Be cautious though, because I've had situations where I've had complaints from professional people where a prospect says, "Is that insured?" And they say, "No, it's not." And they're head nodding as they say it. You can't go there. You've got to separate yeses and nos. So you have to say, no, it's not insured. But over long periods of time, what we find, and you're head nodding. Read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. He has an entire chapter on head nodding. It's incredibly well written, and it's about a college that wants to raise tuition. And they do a 4-minute presentation to student groups. And in one presentation, the person on the screen is done in video is not nodding his head. In the other one, he's shaking his head sideways. In the third one, he's nodding up and down. And just take a look. When he's moving his head side to side while speaking, it's incredible. Fewer than 43, I think it's 43% agree to raise tuition. When he's just maintaining a solid head without movement, it moves up to about 53, 55%. But when he head nods, it's over 70% agreement. Crazy world. Okay, welcome to it. Want to have fun with a head nod? I need your help on this because I can never remember the woman's name. There was a woman from South Carolina, senator, I believe, who was running for the presidency in the last election. She's a Republican. Well, anyway, if you want to have a little fun, Google this after our meeting. She's at the Republican National Convention. Donald Trump has kind of pushed her to the side. She's now irrelevant. But she has to go on stage and say, I support Donald Trump. And the wording is not going to be accurate, but the nonverbals are. She goes on stage and says, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I endorse Donald Trump in his run for the presidency of the United States without hesitation. Did you see what I did with my head? I support Donald Trump. Just moves her head back and forth through the entire statement saying that she endorses him for the presidency. I was on the floor laughing watching this on TV. My wife of course, my kids have heard so many stories. They're all like, look, Dad, she's saying no. And I said, well, yes, I guess she is. But you're going to see that happening, okay? We talked about three things. They're pretty obvious: eye contact, smiling, head nodding. Let's look at three things you might not have considered. I'm going to turn, I'm hoping this plays out accurately in a virtual setting. Number 4 on the list is going to be posture. Okay. Do you sit with erect posture? I mean, let's look at it. If I'm leaning way back and I say, oh, have a seat, let me talk to you about investments and how it works. Am I ever going to close a presentation with a backward lean, putting my hands behind my head? The word arrogance appears on your forehead. It's not a good place to be. Of course, we don't do that generally. We're going to sit erect. But erect isn't emotional. And I want you to know that you should sit erect. But I would like you to consider strategically leaning forward on occasion. So I'm speaking to a husband and wife, and I say, so what's new with you folks? And he says, my mother passed away 2 weeks ago. This has been a very difficult time for us. You don't want to sit erect and say, wow, bummer. What you're probably going to find yourself doing is leaning in. Sorry, I couldn't resist. What you're going to find, if you want to be seen effectively, is that you lean in about 4 inches. If you lean more than 4 inches, I will show you momentarily why that would work against you. But leaning in shows a commitment to listening. It shows interest. It shows consideration to the individuals with whom you're communicating. It eliminates opportunities for distraction. A forward lean says, I'm in your space now. If you lean too far forward, and you've all seen this happen, it shows eagerness. Okay? This person's saying, I will say anything that closes the sale. You don't want to go there. You're allowed 4 inches. You're allowed to lean forward about 4 inches. If the topic of discussion is highly emotional, this is what you do. Okay? I work with financial advisors around the world. I've worked in Pakistan, I've worked in Turkey, France, Europe, Jordan, Abu Dhabi. If it's a place that doesn't have restaurants, I've been there. What I find is kind of interesting. There are 2 ways that you can approach a person. I think giving a command when you sit with a prospect is the best way to start your meeting. I've had people just, ask questions. So are you from here? You're controlling the flow of conversation. I'm going to give you a 4-word sentence and a 5-word follow-up that I think is the best way to start a conversation with someone you're meeting for the first time. I would sit down, I would lean forward, I'd say, raise your vocal pitch. You're going to give a command here. If you don't raise the vocal pitch, it sounds a little nasty. I'd say, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Okay? The reason I do that is, number 1, raising the vocal pitch, it doesn't sound like a command. Tell me about yourself. That is a command. But tell me about yourself. Okay, I'm giving a command. If they respond, they've automatically put me a little bit higher in the pecking order here at this meeting. Tell me about yourself will be followed by a list of things that these people value in direct order. So typically for a male, tell me about yourself. He'll say job, he'll say family, he might say a hobby or 2. So he'll say, well, I'm a medical doctor. I'm a surgeon. I'm married and I have 2 children. And between you and me, I love football. It's football season. So this is a great time for me. Great. Thanks for sharing. Okay. If you say, tell me about yourself to a female, it's about 50-50 now. But historically, she would mention family first, job second, and then whatever third. Okay. So she'd say, I'm married, I have 2 children, I'm a doctor, I'm a surgeon actually, and I have a dog named Lucky, or whatever the third one is. My favorite one, in all the years I've worked with people, this is my favorite response to the 4-letter command, tell me about yourself. And if you have not met this guy, he will be coming to your office soon. I said to this guy I was working with, tell me about yourself. He just jumped. He said, Bill, I own a Maserati. Think about it. He could have talked about his family. He might have mentioned his work. He mentioned his Maserati. I'm not an idiot. I said, did you drive it here? He said, yeah. I said, can we take a minute to go see it? I closed the sale right there. I was done. I absolutely nailed this guy in 30 seconds or less. Tell me about yourself. Bill, I own a Maserati. Let's go see it. Done. Wasn't going to lose. Okay. So what you want to do is allow them. You say, tell me about yourself. They give you a little bit of information. Use a 5-word follow-up. Tell me more about yourself. You want to know it, as you realize, as much as you can, but you really want to get it from their perspective. I want to know what you folks value rather than my personal bias imprinted on your family. So tell me about yourself. We're really big on education. I've got 3 kids in college right now. We're big on education, and we're absolutely emptying our bank accounts. And, you know, you can laugh about it, but let them speak about what's important to them. That's a great strategy. You lean forward as a listener. You give them 4 inches, maybe 5, but don't go crazy with it. Just lean forward and listen, and head nod when you listen. Guys, if you don't do that naturally, start. Okay, you'll be much better received as a listener. So number 4 is body lean or posture. Number 5 is going to be, let me think a second. What we're looking at with number 5 is we're going to look at leg positioning. Okay. Almost, if you're in an open area when you're selling, almost every male and female will cross their legs. I can't act this out. I guess I could do this, but we're not going to go there. What we see happening is that men cross their legs and they send information. Okay. So under the age of 25, the average man will throw one leg upon the other, 1 foot upon the other. His ankle will be to the inside of the leg. Okay. And that screams masculinity. By age 38, he's a little older. The hips are not as flexible as they used to be. When that leg comes up, the ankle's to the outside of the other leg. So his right leg is up on his left and the ankle's way out there. Okay. That tells me 3 things. Number 1, he's married. Number 2, he has 2.3 children. And number 3, he drove a Sienna minivan to work. Okay. This is somebody who's getting older. He's married. He's in the groove. He's figured out what's happening in life and he's running that course. What we see very rarely, and it works in Cleveland, is something called a 2-point cross. When a male comes into your work area, and if you have a table and you're working at a conference table, this isn't going to fly. But if you're in an open area, like a little reception corner in your office, and he sits with one knee atop the other, this is called the aristocratic leg cross. Only 12% of adult males sit with one knee atop the other. And that screams high social status, high net worth, and high personal power. You want his business. If he folds his arms like this at the wrist, on that knee, you totally want his business. So that's a very rare behavior. In Europe, a 5-year-old is going to be told to sit that way. In the US, we don't practice that. Women with leg cross behavior, not that big a deal. Okay. She's going to cross her legs at the knee, but that's more about protection because she's wearing a dress or historically has been wearing a dress, which is less and less likely now. But that's what's going on. I'm sorry. Are you chilly? Sorry. I can't help. I can't do anything. Let me go to the 6th behavior. And the 6th behavior is, what do I do with my hands? Okay. There are 2 things you can do. If you're at a desk or a table, I want you to know, I'm going to give you a formula. Competence and trustworthiness are factors that associate with personal power. So I'm going to give you a formula regarding your body behavior and personal power. And it is this. And Al looks terrific on this one. Movement and power are inversely related. Movement and power are inversely related. So when you get in front of a prospect, I'll try to put my hands here. If I put my hands on the table, the less I move, the more competence I'm showing. I mean, you've all seen people who mess around, rub their hands, flick pens. That's called an object adapter. That indicates psychological discomfort. They flutter around with papers. Movement and power are inversely related. You get a prospect who doesn't move. I mean, you want to make sure they're engaged in the conversation, but the less they move, the more socially adept they are, the more power they're projecting. So I advocate moving your hands for one of two reasons, okay? Functionally. So I'm going to show you a contract. Here's what we've got. That's great. You're doing a function. The other one is, I believe you should gesture decisively. Don't do a half gesture. Get out there. How do you gesture when you've got a husband and wife? You take your palms, and I'm going to do it up here, but it should be out to the side. Ideally, we gesture to the outside elbows of the audience. So I'm going to extend my arms outward to your outside elbows. If I have a group of 7, the hands are way out here. If I have a group of 2, my hands are going to be, it's almost an embrace. Showing your palms indicates that you have, ideally, they have nothing to fear. I have no weapon. I'm not a threat. And putting the palms out to the level of the width of your audience is the appropriate way. You don't want to send them way out here if there's 2 people. That's kind of silly. And I've seen people doing this. That doesn't work either. You've got to embrace those people with your gesture. Okay, so gesturing decisively is important. And so I recommend moving very little, moving functionally if you have to show something, or take the moment to gesture decisively, and that's where you want to be. How are we doing? Helpful?
Yep.
You're probably going to be analyzing everybody you meet with for the next few months. Can we do a little bit more on gender communication? Let me see what I've got here. Okay, here's a good one. Men listen with their ears. Women listen with their eyes. Okay? Men listen with their ears. We don't have to look at you to listen. We can do this. A lot of them will write. You don't want to go there. But women, it's absolutely critical that when you're listening to a female that you maintain eye contact. For males, it's less of an issue. So you want to be concerned about doing that. You want to do it well. We have a couple of things that are kind of interesting. For example, men will insult each other all day long and no one is offended. Okay? Because we don't mean it. We insult each other, it's a game. Women don't do that. You don't get to play the insult game. I will toss it off the stage occasionally, but I would recommend being a little more conservative with regards to that. The other things I look at when I look at gender communication, I want to mention something. We will scream non-verbally what we're thinking, okay? How do you know when a person is ready to make a purchase? When a person is literally saying, close me, I've gotten there, okay? I look for several things. You're presenting information about a service, about a product, whatever. And if you see them breaking eye contact and looking up to the corner of the room, left or right, doesn't matter. If they break eye contact and they look away but upward, they're considering your message. They're now weighing the pluses and minuses. Okay? It might be like 10 seconds. It might actually be more than half a minute. They break eye contact, they look up and away. When they come back to you, they're going to signal to you. And they're going to signal when they look back at you by doing one of 2 things. Okay? Women are very passive listeners. Men are very active listeners. Men are going to, if I'm going to say, we're done here. I'm sitting with my leg crossed, most likely. When a man uncrosses his legs and shifts the trunk of his body, stop. Go for the close. But don't do it aggressively. Just look at him and say, what do you think? You see, he will do that if he has an objection that must be responded to. He will also do it if he's ready to commit to a purchase. So uncrossing the legs and shifting the trunk of the body. I mean, let's be honest. We're lazy, males and females. We don't do all this body movement unless something is going on up here. We'll just sit and hang there as long as it takes. But if I uncross my legs, shift the trunk of my body, it's either an objection you must address, or I'm asking you, can we make a commitment here? You're talking past your sale. So that's when you look at a person and say, what do you think? Again, raising my voice. I'm giving a command, but I don't want it to be perceived that way. I'll say, what do you think? Does this sound like it might be interesting for you? Whatever. Women will buy with their legs crossed. They're on earth to confuse us. But there are indications that a woman is ready to make a purchase. And the biggest, most accurate indication is called scooching. Okay? So a female is sitting with her legs crossed. They're going to stay crossed, but she will scooch up and she's going to move to the edge of her seat. If she moves up to the edge of her seat, stop. She's telling you that we need to change topic. So you're going to say, what do you think? She will either tell you she's got an objection or she will make a commitment. She'll say, let's do it. I had a guy from Raymond, no, not Raymond James, the company out of St. Louis. I'm blanking on their names. But I had a guy in South Carolina. He called me after I did a meeting. And I said, when a woman moves up to the edge of the seat, ask for a commitment. He said, I had a young lady come in. I have a 45-minute sales presentation for mutual funds. I'm 15 minutes into it, and she slides up to the edge of the seat. And I looked at her and I said, what do you think? And she said, let's do it. She had inherited, and it's crazy how I remember all these details. She had inherited $85,000 and wanted to immediately get that money working for her. She liked what he had to say. She didn't need the extra 30-minute presentation. So she moved up to the edge of the seat, trying to get his attention and have him ask for a commitment, which he did, and it worked. Okay. I'm good to cut right here. I need to know if you have any questions or if you need clarification on something. I will send some notes to you, Al. I've got your email. It's weird because it didn't come in on my computer. It didn't come in on my regular iPad, but it came in on a different iPad. I have no idea what's going on there. But I will send out a copy of notes from this meeting so that you'll have that. And I'll put my phone number on there. With a small group like this, I'll tell you what, if you have a specific question, feel free to give me a holler. I get my best stories from people that I extend a phone number to. So I would be happy to spend the time and hopefully be helpful. Any questions
Excellent.
before we part company?
Any questions for Bill?
Fantastic.
Bill, thank you very much. It was wonderful as always.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today. So you all have a wonderful day.
You are there.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. See if I can figure out how to shut this one down.
It is hilarious.
Get him to the office.
So is the